The latest installment in the Ryan Johnson Knives Out series came out little over a month ago, and it seems a fourth installment is also a possibility. So I figured why not review all three of them. After watching and rewatching all three movies, I can safely say that this is one of the best and consistently great franchises in recent memory. It's a series that actually respects your time and your brain, all the while entertaining you from beginning to end. So let's talk about it.
Enter Benoit Blanc.
2019 was arguably one of the best years for movies in the last decade. Parasite, Little Women, The Lighthouse, 1917, Midsommar, Jojo Rabbit, Doctor Sleep, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and of course, Knives Out. What makes Knives Out stand out, even in a year like that, isn't just that it's very well written, but that it's an ensemble film done right. I really appreciate it whenever a non-superhero movie manages to gather this many well-known actors in one place. It makes the film feel like an event. You've got Captain America, James Bond, Joy from Blade Runner 2049, that terrifying mother from Hereditary, Arnold's wife from True Lies, General Zod himself, and stuttering Bill from It. I'm pretty sure I missed some, but the point is that seeing all these familiar faces sharing the same space makes the movie insanely rewatchable. Having said that, there were some drawbacks. Captain America goes from America's ass to an American dick, and Joy from Blade Runner 2049 becomes a woman who throws up when she lies, which is kind of silly, but it works within the movie's established world. More on that later. However, none of this distracted me quite as much as Mr. Bond himself. Daniel Craig's accent was genuinely jarring, especially after seeing him in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and James Bond for so many years. Thankfully, it slowly but steadily grew on me. I didn't realize right away, but apparently this wasn't the first time he played an eccentric southern character, and by the third movie, I actually like it. It also helps that unlike his James Bond movies, the movies in this series are consistent with their quality. So far, there are no bad movies here. I do think that some of these actors are underutilized though. I mean, come on, you have actors capable of Oscar caliber performances, and you barely give them a challenge? But that's a minor nitpick. Everyone still delivers with what they're given, especially Ana de Armas as Marta. These movies generally follow the same pattern, where Benoit Blanc is pretty much a side character who enters the story to more or less assist the real protagonist. And in the first Knives Out, that protagonist is very clearly Marta. Ryan Johnson's love for the mystery genre is obvious throughout the series, but nowhere more so than in here. From Blanc working with an officer literally named Watson, to the victim being a mystery writer, living in a mansion full of secret passageways and fake knives. The film is very proud and respectful of its influences. The editing is fast-paced and funny, which makes each rewatch incredibly easy, and that's important because despite being played by legendary actors, most of the family members are obnoxious as hell. Marta's inability to lie without vomiting is silly on paper, but it's used incredibly well. Every scene between her and Blanc becomes more suspenseful because she has to lie without lying, which turns what could have been boring exposition into something genuinely engaging. It also helps that Marta is more than just a pretty face. She's very capable, clever, and resourceful, even while presenting herself as clueless. Whether it's hiding her footprints or running a kitchen magnet over the security tapes, she constantly proves she's smarter than people assume. Ana de Armas is fantastic here. She already stood out in Blade Runner 2049, but in Knives Out, she completely steals the show. The only characters on her level are Blanc and Chris Evans as Ransom. Evans clearly had a blast playing against type, and it shows. He feels unhinged, smug, and dangerous in a way that's fun to watch. Marta also has great chemistry with everyone, from the detective to the murderer to the victim. Her relationship with Harlan in particular feels less like a nurse and patient and more like a grandfather with his granddaughter, arguably healthier than any relationship he has with his own children, who straight up suck. That's why Blanc, even when he suspects her involvement, takes his time reaching for the conclusion. The misdirection in this movie is also some of the best I've ever seen, from the granny mistaking Martha for Ransom scene, to the dogs barking at Ransom, to the Hugh did this scene, and my personal favorite, thinking Ransom is helping Martha screw over his family, only to later realize he's actually trying to further incriminate her. It's also carefully constructed. One thing Knives Out does beautifully is switching between mystery and thriller, without ever feeling forced. The shift happens organically, driven entirely by story rather than style. The humor is another huge strength of this movie. The family hates each other so much that they regularly miss critical information because they are too busy arguing, insulting, or getting into physical fights. Michael Shannon in particular is incredible at getting distracted in the funniest ways. He's also the family member who gets the most screen time outside of Marta, Blanc, and Ransom. He's over the top in a funny way, but he can also be threatening when he has to be, especially when he confronts Marta and talks about her mother being an illegal immigrant.
And you come into this inheritance with all the scrutiny that entails, I'd be afraid that could come to light. And that's what we want to avoid here. We can protect you from that happening.
Also, and your mileage may vary here, but I love that in this movie, the car stalking someone gets caught. Too many movies and shows have scenes where a car is parked across the street and the people who are obviously getting watched barely even notice it. Like the car is right there. How can you not notice it? Sure, at times there are several cars, so it's hard to pay attention to all of them, but when you have just one, or maybe two or three cars, how do you not see it? In here, however, Blanc does see it, and he even notices it being Marta. I loved it. Small details like this is what makes the movie so fun and rewarding. The movie isn't afraid to get silly either, and by the end, it fully embraces that silliness. So silly and yet so good. Having said all that, I do have one real problem. Fran is dumb. Confronting Hugh alone, unarmed, in an empty place was just stupid. Why would you do that? Why not just go straight to the authorities, you dumbass? Thankfully, her mistake does give us one of Martha's strongest character moments, as she risks her own freedom to save Fran and call 911. That selflessness makes the final shot of Martha standing on the balcony feel so much more satisfying because compared to Harlan's own children, she actually deserves it. A straight up, well-earned boss moment. 9 out of 10, a modern classic.
Heavens. You dim-witted, brainless jackass!
Sometimes, the most obvious answer really is the right one. In Glass Onion, it takes Benoit Blanc only a couple of hours after Duke's death to figure out the entire mystery, which is surprisingly fast, and yet I completely missed it in my first viewing. Also, seeing Daniel Craig's character try to save Dave Bautista's character after helping to kill him in the first movie they worked together on was also a fun little meta moment. You could make entire Easter egg type videos just off the castings alone. I mean, the Hulk kills Drax while Agatha and Mr. Aaron Burroughs, sir, do nothing but watch. Maybe it's just me, but I can never get tired of such connections. And I know I cannot be the only one. Like, come on, in the next movie, Hawkeye loses his wife and children, again, while assisting in the murder of Thanos himself, like a true Avenger. How can I just ignore it? Circling back to Hulk, Tyler Durden finally takes over Edward Norton, makes him rich and successful, and yet he is still a dick. I don't care what anyone says, this is fun. Anyway, as for the movie itself, while I don't think Glass Onion is quite as good as the other two, it's still a really fun watch, especially once you know the twists and turns. Honestly, I can listen to Blanc's monologue about how dumb Miles Brown is on repeat, and I have. Everything is right in front of us the entire time, and yet the movie does such a good job gaslighting us. It's so simple and yet so effective. The way the characters are introduced here through split screens as they try to solve some puzzle boxes immediately establishes chemistry. They actually feel like a group of friends, especially Birdie and Claire, all the while also establishing their relationship with Miles, or more importantly, how dependent they all are on him. Miles is the richest, most important one in the group, and they treat him less like a friend and more like a boss. This chemistry later becomes even more essential when Andy enters the picture, because it highlights just how much she stands apart from this group. As usual, there's a ton of foreshadowing throughout the film, especially with Duke's pineapple allergy and his red pill persona being a complete grift. There's also always one actor in these movies who goes way harder than they need to for the amount of screen time they get. Michael Shannon in the first, Kerry Washington in the third, and here, for me, it's Dave Bautista. His whiny, man-child demeanor is convincing, but my favorite moment is his monologue to Andy about how she isn't the only victim.
I'm tired of pretending like you're the victim in this game. You're the loser. There. That's the truth.
It took me a rewatch to actually agree with him. Andy absolutely gets the worst treatment out of everyone, but Duke is probably second. His career is entirely dependent on Miles. He even pimps out his own girlfriend for it, which doesn't work, and his mother emasculates him while he's live on stream, which for a Red Pill influencer has to be somewhat humiliating. So when he delivers that monologue, even though the character sucks, Dave Bautista absolutely sells it. With all that set up, I genuinely thought he'd end up being the main killer, only for him to be the first and only on-screen death. Now that is how you subvert expectations. Daniel Craig is also at his absolute best as Benoit Blanc here. He gets way more screen time and actually feels like one of the main leads this time around. His accent fits better and his physical comedy is showcased more, whether it's rubbing hot sauce in his eyes or accidentally smoking in a no-smoking area and running away afterwards in flip-flops. There's also a small moment I love where Ethan Hawke uses some mouth spray that makes everyone choke, including Duke, but Blanc barely reacts at all. It's subtle, but it says so much about his composure. Visually, the framing is just as strong as the first film. The camera constantly focuses on one element before shifting or zooming out to reveal another person or piece of information in the same shot. The characters themselves also help with the blocking by wearing large hats. Speaking of such a flamboyant attire, it's hard not to notice that some characters, like Birdie in particular, feel almost sitcom level dumb, which makes her interactions with Claire way more entertaining. One is delusional, dumb, and hot. The other is average, but clearly, with a K, much smarter. And yet, they both serve the same man, Miles. Miles Braun is pretentious to the point of inventing fake words and making dumb decisions. But since he's surrounded by yes men, he keeps getting away with it. He is an accurate critique of rich people who think they're smarter than everyone else. The parallels to real-life billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk are too obvious to be missed. His original ideas, like hydrogen fuel and the glass house, are stupid, but like his real-life counterparts, he's very good at stealing other people's ideas, like burning the napkin and Blanc's gun idea, or taking over them and running them into the ground like Twitter. Because of his reputation, everyone, including Blanc himself, assumes he's smarter than he actually is. Blanc even states that his only weakness is stupidity.
I'm very bad at dumb things. My Achilles heel. It all adds up. The key to this entire case. And it was staring me right in the face. I assumed Miles Braun was a complicated genius. Miles Braun is an idiot.
And Miles is indeed an idiot, which ironically allows him to outplay Blanc for a while. Thankfully, while Blanc is outsmarted by an idiot, Helen isn't. She doesn't engage Miles on an intellectual level because there's no point. So, she pretty much blows everything up, literally. Miles may have won the battle, but Helen won the war. Watching Miles react to the Mona Lisa burning, something he failed so miserably to stop, is hilarious. Edward Norton plays this inglorious buffoon perfectly, especially with his facial expressions. Seriously, pay attention to his face whenever someone says something even remotely clever, before he steals it, of course. My favorite moment is when Lionel points out the napkin burning. Miles' brief frown here suggests that he never even considered it. That's how dumb he is. Helen, while not as instantly likable as Martha or Judd in the other films, matches Blanc better than anyone in terms of personality. She is eccentric, volatile, and a bit of a loose cannon. Her accent slipping whenever she drops the act of sophistication bounces off Blanc's energy perfectly. I also love how she becomes the co-detective in the second half, often picking up on more clues than Blanc himself. Revisiting earlier scenes from her point of view also gives them entirely new meaning and almost feels like watching a time loop movie. The editing remains excellent, the montages paired with voiceovers are perfect, and even the smallest setups get paid off. The car crash from above, Miles and the Mona Lisa being verbally linked together, the smokeless garden going up in flames as Blanc bites into a cigar. Small details like that are what make rewatches so rewarding. I do have one minor issue though. When Helen gets shot through the glass and then suddenly sits up not long after, it felt a little too quick. What if Miles was still there to confirm she was dead? He is stupid enough to do that, isn't he? I don't know, man. His intelligence is occasionally inconsistent. He is shown smart enough to help his friends with their careers, but then fails to understand why using hydrogen fuel for energy is such a dumb idea. That said, as someone who didn't realize until a rewatch that Blanc's entire deduction sequence takes place only a couple hours after Duke's death, I cannot pretend to be some kind of authority on being smart either. I really think the flashback structure tricked my sense of time when I saw it for the first time. Once Blanc realizes Miles is an idiot, everything clicks almost immediately. And honestly, this is my favorite explanation scene in the whole trilogy. Blanc's monologues dismantling Miles as an idiot, combined with his rant about Miles stealing other people's ideas, are endlessly entertaining. Simple mystery, simple answer, perfect execution. 8.5 out of 10.
David facing off Goliath. Young, dumb, and full of Christ.
I can't help but wonder if Rian Johnson saw those memes about the Avengers losing to Thanos in Infinity War because they didn't have Hawkeye. Because here, they do take Thanos out. Hawkeye isn't the one who does it directly, but he is a major player. I do think that with each movie, the reveal of who did it has become slightly easier to predict. There's almost always an Avenger involved. The mastermind is played by one of the more recognizable actors, and with the third one in particular, there are 3 people conspiring together. That's probably my biggest issue with this entry. There was only one killer in the first 2 movies, but by the third one, there are 3 people working together. By doing this, it increases the odds of us guessing who the bad guy is, since there are multiple bad guys, which means to narrow it down, Mr. Johnson has to kill them off, which creates its own problem by eliminating the possible suspects for us too. I mean seriously, who thought that any of these losers was the killer? Vegetable violin lady can barely walk, Django's wife and Moriarty are played by semi-famous actors, but they're also barely in the movie, giving them the Toni Collette treatment. And this guy is so obsessed with internet clout, I doubt he even has any useful real-life skills to begin with. Glenn Close, meanwhile, gets more screen time than all of them combined, and with every death, she climbs higher on the suspect list. I figured out pretty early that she was either the mastermind or at least involved in executing the plan, but I had no idea how, and that's where the movie still succeeds. This was the easiest film in the trilogy to guess who did it, but the hardest to figure out how it was done. I knew Martha was involved, but the idea that she wasn't acting alone didn't even cross my mind until halfway through the movie. This is also probably the saddest Knives Out movie. The ending is still uplifting, sure, but the characters' lives here are rough. Taking care of an obnoxious kid who isn't even related to you, watching your father figure kill himself just to destroy his own daughter's life, losing your family and becoming a bitter alcoholic, losing your creative spark to the point you start believing in conspiracies. These characters are far more broken than anyone we've seen in the previous movies. The movie also returns to something I really love, a strong, kind, morally grounded lead, like the first movie, but with some of the eccentric, playful energy of the second. Josh O'Connor's Father Judd is one of the best characters in the entire trilogy, and his introduction is the fastest I have ever liked a character in this series.
Christ came to heal the world, not fight it. I believe that. It's this, not this, you know?
Josh O'Connor is excellent in both the sincere moments and the comedic ones. And on top of that, he also has to provide narration. His voice is surprisingly pleasant to listen to. Despite having miserable characters, this might also be the funniest movie in the trilogy.
We've got to find him, nail him. I'm sorry,
Here's what's gonna happen. Benoit frickin' Blanc and I are gonna ask you all some questions, and you're gonna answer them. We're gonna get to the bottom of who killed Monsignor Wicks and why. And then, that's it.
The tradition of near-perfect casting continues with this movie, with maybe one exception, Mila Kunis. She felt oddly out of place here, especially when Glenn Close is dominating every scene she's in. Close is incredible here, and I genuinely hope she gets at least an Oscar nomination for this. If Jamie Lee Curtis can win for Everything Everywhere All at Once, Glenn Close deserves something for her troubles too. Other than her, Thanos himself, Josh Brolin, is also chewing the scenery as an equally funny and detestable character, who is somehow just as entertaining as Chris Evans in the first film, if not more.
I've masturbated, well, let's say 30 times. Bed, in the morning once. Once in the middle of the night after a dream about...
That's all right.
About one of those Japanese cat cafes.
Okay.
So I had to finish into a copy of Catholic Chronicle magazine. And then twice in the shower this week, doing that thing I told you about where I hold my hand upside down.
Between Brolin, O'Connor, and Close, they're so compelling that for a while, I honestly forgot that Benoit Blanc was also supposed to be in the movie. Blanc doesn't show up until about 35 minutes in, but I didn't mind waiting this time. And when Blanc does finally show up, his chemistry with Father Judd is just as fantastic as his interactions with the last two leads. In fact, Judd might actually outshine Blanc here. Don't get me wrong, Daniel Craig is still excellent, and at this point, Benoit Blanc might just be the best character he has ever played. But Father Judd was a genuine surprise. His interactions with Monsignor Wicks and Martha explore their very different approaches to faith, and his hopeful, occasionally combative banter with Blanc makes for some of the most engaging character dynamics in the trilogy. One of my favorite moments in the entire movie is Father Judd's conversation with Louise. The patience, kindness, and quiet empathy he shows her is genuinely touching. Wake Up Dead Man also continues the tradition of having one famous actor absolutely kill it in a small role. Like I've mentioned before, in the first film it was Michael Shannon, in the second Dave Bautista, and here it's Kerry Washington. These performances might not be remembered as much due to them being overshadowed by larger roles like Martha in the first, Blanc himself in the second, and Glenn Close here, but they still leave an impression. Close's confession scene at the climax in particular is on a completely different level. It might even be the best acted scene in the entire trilogy if you ask me. On the flip side, there's always at least one actor who feels underused. In the first film, it was Bill from It. In the second, Leslie Odom Jr. And here, it's Andrew Scott. He was so good in Fleabag and acceptable in Sherlock, but here, he's just there. He's not bad, mind you, but he's not much of a standout either. The first time I watched this movie, it instantly became my favorite of the series. Then I rewatched it for this video, and now I'd say it's back to being equal with the other two. That brings me to the things I did not love. As I mentioned earlier, the reveal felt more obvious this time. Rian Johnson is very aware of pop culture, and he isn't afraid to use actors and characters for some commentary. Like how he uses characters like Miles Braun as a critique on the talentless billionaires who steal ideas and make fortunes off of other people's works. And here, Sai is very clearly a stand-in for modern media grifters. People with zero media literacy who just so happen to not understand Star Wars. But also, someone who latches onto political talking points just for clout. His introduction immediately tells you what kind of a person he is, which makes his downfall that much more satisfying, but also predictable. Johnson's pop culture awareness is fun, but sometimes it can backfire. Like, come on, you killed off Thanos. Obviously, the only Avenger you have in the cast is going to be a suspect. And yes, I'll admit this is dumb, but I figured out Glenn Close was the villain partly because she played one in Fatal Attraction, which is the only other movie I have seen her in. The moment I saw her sneaky behavior with that smug Eustace face and how involved she was in literally everything from handling bills, dressing Wicks to managing other details, I knew she was behind it. I just did not know how. Thankfully, that question itself became more interesting to me than the reveal. Unfortunately, there are still some logistical questions that bother me, like why is Blanc here at all? In the first movie, he is secretly hired. In the second, same deal. Here, no one seems to have hired him. He just randomly takes an interest in this case. Based on the previous two movies, movies, he doesn't seem to live anywhere near the church or the small town that he is in for this movie. So again, why was he here? To make matters worse, there are several things within the crime that also confuse me, like when Nat uses the remote to trigger the devil head on Vic's clothes to release some fake blood. Well, why didn't the autopsy question it? They just saw blood and assumed it was Vic's by default. No one in the whole investigation, from the detectives to the medical practitioners to the cops, once questioned if the blood was even real. Is that what happens in small towns with limited resources? Also, shouldn't the autopsy reveal that Vicks was drunk and drugged? Shouldn't toxicology reveal drugs and alcohol in Vic's system? Maybe I missed something. So feel free to correct me in the comments below. Having said all that, these are mostly minor issues. Wake Up Dead Man is still incredibly fun, emotionally satisfying, and very consistent with the quality of the rest of the trilogy. 9 out of 10.
Storytelling. Guess the question is, do these stories convince us of a lie, or do they resonate with something deep inside us that's profoundly true?
One of my favorite things about this series as a whole is that most of the clues and answers are given to you from early on, but they are sidelined in favor of what feels like more important information at the time. Then, once you know the reveals, everything clicks into place like puzzle pieces. A big reason this works is because of how contained the trilogy is. All three stories mostly take place in a single location: a mansion, a private island, and a church. It's honestly impressive how Rian Johnson and cinematographer Steve Yedlin managed to frame, block, and stage so many actors and props without the visuals ever feeling cluttered. There are several scenes where the camera zooms in or out of a shot, visually feeding us information about this world and the people who occupy it. A personal favorite of mine is when in the third movie, the sunlight lands on the characters and especially that empty cross on the wall. The symbolism is a bit on the nose, but delivered with such skillfulness that I can't help but love it nonetheless. Not to mention, a lot of setups, payoffs, and foreshadowing is done visually as well, like when Nat keeps fidgeting with his ring, which helps the audience identify his body later on. Rian Johnson sure knows how to show and not just tell, although he does have lots of fun dialogues as well. I'm not just talking about witty banter or long dramatic monologues, even though there's plenty of that, but also dialogues that are specific to the characters. Every character sounds so distinct that you can probably close your eyes, listen to a scene, and still know exactly who's speaking. Pair that with efficient editing and the pacing never drags, even during exposition-heavy moments. Then there's Benoit Blanc. One of my favorite running gags across the entire trilogy is Blanc saying no in response to a silly question or statement, and the fact that it shows up in all three movies never gets old.
Trooper Wagner.
Trooper Wagner?
No. It's so dumb.
Oh, it's so dumb, it's brilliant.
No! It's just dumb.
And would you consider blurbing my book?
No.
Which brings us to the future. Knives Out 4 is probably in the works as we speak, and a lot of things feel guaranteed at this point. Strong visual foreshadowing, airtight setup and payoffs, and another carefully staged setting where the majority of the characters will gather. As for the characters themselves, I do hope we get a morally grey character this time. Not a terrible person, mind you, just not a perfect one either. For example, imagine if in the first Knives Out, Marta was having an affair or something. Not a crime as severe as murder, but still selfish and morally questionable enough. Let's say that when Walt comes to confront Marta, instead of threatening her with her mother's legal status, he offers to work for her as the man responsible for publishing his father's books. From outside, he's being a nice guy, especially compared to the rest of the family. But it can be revealed that Marta and Walt were having an affair, and Harlan only knew that Walt was cheating on his wife while not knowing Marta was the other woman. Maybe Walt in this scenario isn't the son but son-in-law. This way, Harlan's death can lead to some complex emotions for Marta's character, since she did genuinely care about Harlan, just not his daughter. Suddenly, Marta's emotional journey becomes more complicated. Her innocence isn't pure anymore, but the crime against her still outweighs her mistakes. In the hierarchy of moral decay, cheating is still nowhere near as bad as murder, and that tension could be really compelling, especially when it's mixed in with grief and regret. Anyway, this is just an example. Regardless of where Rian Johnson takes it next, this trilogy is already one of the most entertaining and rewatchable series of movies in recent times. They're clever without being smug, dense without being exhausting, and consistently respectful of the audience's intelligence. I genuinely can't wait for the next one. Now the only question is, what other trilogy should I talk about next?
Factory of divisive opinions. Bang! Every breakdown got that clang.